love driving at night, especially when I don't have to go anywhere specific. It's kind of therapeutic to me. At least, it used to be. I'm 18 years old. I graduated not long ago. A week or two before I graduated, I went to one of my friend's graduation parties. I left that party at about 10 that night. I live about 30 miles outside of town. Roughly 20 miles of that is on dirt roads, so it's a pretty far drive. I had just turned down one of those roads, and I was in a good mood. The window was down and the radio was playing softly. It was very relaxing. I wasn't going that fast, only about 45 miles an hour, just cruising. Up ahead, I saw something moving. It could have been a coyote or an antelope. And suddenly, it crossed the road right in front of me. I swerved to miss it. I used to drive a 2002 Jeep Wrangler. Wranglers are naturally very top-heavy, this one even more so as it had a 4-inch lift kit. I swerved too hard and rolled into a ditch. The last thing I remember is smashing my forehead into the windshield and blacking out. Sometime later, I woke up with a start. I was upside down. I was bleeding pretty badly from a gash in my forehead, but I couldn't remember what had happened. It took me a moment to realize I had just been woken up by something. Something was lurking around the Jeep, sniffing and snuffling like a large dog. A putrid, decaying smell invaded my nostrils. It was strong enough to make me gag. I remembered the pale, naked, thin figure walking on the road in front of me, its horridly long and dangling arms, its tall, thin head, and those small, beady eyes that glowed in my headlights. This was not a human. I kept a K-bar knife, which is used by Marines and Navy SEALs, that I had bought with my birthday money in the Jeep for emergency situations. The middle console had been spilled open in the wreck, so I searched and found the knife on the roof. Remember, the Jeep was upside down. Trying not to panic, I grabbed it and it cut my seatbelt, falling to the floor with a thud. There was an excruciating pain in my left arm. I couldn't move it. I bit through the pain and sat up. I could hear the snuffling outside grow quicker and more frantic. He must have heard me. Suddenly, I could see 2 feet outside the driver's side window. The feet were much like the rest of the creature I had seen, disproportionately long and thin, ending in 4 toes. There was dried blood crusted on them. Then there was a scratching on the door. I was trying to get in. Frantically, I plunged my hand out the open window and stabbed the creature in the foot. It let out a piercing shriek and ran off into the night. I crawled out the window, and I tried to stand up too quickly and passed out again. I woke up in the hospital the next day. My dad had gotten worried about me about 20 minutes after I should have been home and went looking for me. He found me passed out next to my overturned Jeep. I had lost a lot of blood and suffered some head trauma. Out of fear of being called crazy or not being taken seriously, I told everyone I'd fallen asleep at the wheel. It still didn't explain the scratches on the driver's side door of the Jeep. Scratches that looked like they had been made by a man. For the next few months, there would be strange talk in town. Ranchers in the area would report dead cattle with their entrails strewn about everywhere. People in cafes would tell stories about seeing strange lights, hearing strange noises, even spotting strange eyes in the night. In time, it seemed everyone had seen the elusive thin man of Tatum, New Mexico. But all talk and reports of such a creature stopped after a few months. The creature and the strange lights disappeared. I don't think I'll ever go driving at night again. If anyone has any idea what this creature was, please let me know. It is by far the most confusing night of my life. Being an Uber driver in Las Vegas, I've had my fair share of late-night pickups. From drunk tourists to locals who've lost track of time at the casino. It's usually an interesting ride, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened on a chilly night in November. I was cruising around the outskirts of the city when I got a ping. The pickup location was from a little-known casino far off the strip. I accepted the ride and drove to the destination. When I arrived, a tall man in a trench coat, his face hidden under a hat, was waiting for me. I couldn't see much of him, but his demeanor gave off a certain edge that made me slightly uncomfortable.
Good evening.
I greeted him as he got into the car. He merely grunted in response, settling himself into the back seat. He was going to a residential address located on the other side of the city, according to the app. The trip would take roughly 45 minutes given the late-night traffic or lack thereof. As we drove, I tried to engage him in light conversation. a habit I've developed to put my passengers at ease. The man was unresponsive, answering only in grunts or nods. I shrugged it off. Not everyone was a chatterbox. But then, about 15 minutes into the drive, my rider got a phone call.
Yes, I understand. I'll take care of it.
He muttered into the phone, his voice low and gruff. The way he said those words sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. The ride was mostly silent after that. My eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, meeting his hidden gaze every time. There was an ominous aura about him that was impossible to shake off, but I chalked it up to my overactive imagination, spurred on by the late hour and the solitary drive. However, what happened next changed everything. The man's phone rang again. He answered it swiftly, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear everything he said, but one phrase stuck out.
The driver doesn't know anything.
A knot formed in my stomach. Why was he talking about me? Why? Questions swirled around in my mind, but I kept my eyes on the road, focused on getting us to the destination as quickly as possible. As if the universe had a sick sense of humor, the car chose that moment to sputter and die right in the middle of a deserted stretch. I felt panic surge through me. Car's sudden breakdown, combined with the mystery of the man in the back seat, was a perfect recipe for a horror movie. I swallowed hard, my throat dry.
Sorry, sir.
I stuttered, trying to hide my growing fear.
Let me see what the problem is.
But as I moved to open the car door, the man's cold hand clamped around my wrist, stopping me in my tracks.
No need.
He said, his voice chillingly calm.
Wait.
And so we sat there, in the middle of nowhere, waiting in silence as the mystery deepened, making the night even more terrifying. The minutes dragged on in tense silence. The only sound was the ticking of the dashboard clock, each second echoing in the confined space of the car. I sat rigid in my seat, acutely aware of the stranger in the back seat, his presence like a weight in the car. Just then, when the tension was becoming unbearable, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. As they came closer, I could make out a black SUV. It pulled up behind us, its high beams momentarily blinding me. Before I could really process what was happening, the man in the back seat broke his silence.
You should stay in the car.
There was an urgency in his voice, a warning. He got out, his tall figure barely visible in the dim light. He walked over to the SUV, leaving me alone, my mind racing with questions and fear. I squinted through the rearview mirror, trying to make sense of what was happening. The man was talking to someone from the SUV, their conversation too hushed for me to hear. Suddenly, he turned and pointed towards my car, towards me. The panic returned, more intense than before. Was I in danger? Should I run? Before I could make a decision, this man returned. He got back into the car without a word, his face as unreadable as before. We sat in silence, the SUV's headlights providing an eerie illumination. Suddenly, my car roared back to life. It startled me. I hadn't even touched the ignition.
Drive.
The man commanded. His voice was cold, authoritative. Despite my confusion and fear, I obeyed, eager to get away from the ominous SUV and its unknown occupants. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV remained where it was, its headlights gradually fading into the distance. The rest of the ride was shrouded in a silence only broken by the occasional directions from the GPS. My mind kept replaying the night's events, the man, the phone call, the mysterious SUV. It all felt like a twisted nightmare. But the cold dread gnawing at my insides was very real. Fortunately, we finally arrived at the destination, an isolated house at the end of a long driveway. The man got out, his imposing figure disappearing into the darkness. Just when I thought the night's ordeal was over, my phone vibrated. An incoming text message. The sender, unknown. The message, get out of there, now. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I read the text. The words, get out of there, now, seemed to echo ominously in the quiet car. My hands shook as I dropped the phone, the bright screen casting eerie shadows in the darkness. My eyes darted to the house. It was an unremarkable structure, save for the utter isolation. Its windows were dark, its surroundings eerily silent. The man was nowhere to be seen. A sense of dread settled over me as though unseen eyes were watching from the darkness. With a jolt, I realized I was still parked at the end of the driveway. I needed to leave, fast. The mystery text, the man, the ominous house, everything screamed danger. My mind spun, the adrenaline pumping as I put the car in reverse. Then, just as I was about to hit the gas, the front door of the house swung open. The man stood there, dim light from inside the house illuminating his frame. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. But instead of approaching the car, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door ajar. Something about the scene felt like a final warning, like an invitation into a trap. Complete terror took over. My foot hit the accelerator, tires screeching as the car sped away from the house. My breathing was ragged, hands tight on the steering wheel. The city lights in the distance seemed miles away. Just as I was starting to think I'd escaped, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Don't stop driving. The rest of the night was a blur. I drove aimlessly, my mind consumed by fear and confusion. The first light of dawn found me parked in a 24-hour diner's lot, my body numb with exhaustion. The following days were filled with paranoia. I reported the incident to the police, but without concrete evidence or clear motive, there was very little they could do. The unknown number that had sent me the warnings was untraceable. I ended up quitting my job with Uber, the fear of another late-night pickup too much to bear. The man, the house, the cryptic texts, they all remain a mystery. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd went into the house that night, but some questions are better left unanswered. From then on, each passing car, every anonymous number sent a chill down my spine. Fear has lessened over time, but it's never truly left. And so, my story remains a chilling reminder, a nightmarish memory of the time I stepped into the darker, unseen world that exists beneath the city's neon-lit facade. A world I had unknowingly entered just by accepting a late-night Uber ride.